All right, hello and welcome to the Atlona Webinar. Our topic today is setting up a touch-free AV room with Atlona. So let's get started with our broadcast. My name is Ken Eagle and I will be your host for today's webinar. And I'm excited to share with you that joining me for this broadcast today is Seth Powell, Atlona's Manager of Sales Engineering. Hello, Seth.
Hey, Ken. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Welcome. All right, before we begin, let me just take a moment and review the GoToWebinar meeting control panel. You should see the attendee control panel and the grab tab. Now, the control panel contains panes that can be expanded or collapsed by clicking on the little plus or minus or arrow button on the left side of each pane. To ask questions, type your questions into the questions pane, please. All questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. And please note that today's webinar is being recorded and Atlona will send out a link to play back this broadcast after the webinar is complete. All right, let's get going then. Good morning, Seth. 2 weeks ago, I kicked off this touch-free AV series with our guests, David Shamir and Adam Griffin, and I started out by saying, when business begins to return to a quote-unquote new normal, it will most likely be with guidelines to protect employees and safety and prevent the spread of COVID-19. Things like sanitizing surfaces, social distancing, and masks will still be with us. And these present a unique challenge for office and meeting environments. Of obvious concern are the typical AV systems that utilize items like a touch panel or a keypad or other physical interface to control equipment and room computers or cables that provide connections to the system. Now, today we're going to discuss exactly how to set up one of these touch-free rooms using Atlona products and their unique built-in features. Atlona is proud to offer both touch-free and low-touch user interface operation on our AV solutions. Simply connect it and forget it. Connect your device to the system and watch the display power up and present your content. From there, you hand off to another presenter by simply disconnecting your device or just walk away and the system shuts down the display. Now, this is accomplished using motion detection combined with simple automation features built into the Atlona products. Seth, let's take a look at how these features create touch-free and low-touch solutions, and then maybe you can show us how easy it is to set up one of these systems with a live demo. All right, so to achieve hands-free operation, Atlona Solutions employ a valuable feature called automatic display control. Now, this means you never have to touch a remote control or a device button to turn the system on. Let me show you how it works. In this example, when automatic display control is enabled, a user only needs to connect the source to an available input, and the Atlona switch will automatically turn on the display and show the source that was just connected. When the presentation is finished, shutting down the system is just as easy. Simply disconnect the source from the display cable and the Atlona switch will automatically turn off the display. So that's how automatic display control works. Seth, let me go ahead and pass control over to you, and maybe you can log into an Atlona device and show us exactly how this works, how to set this up and a demo of it.
Sure thing.
Over to you. Here you go. I am sending control to you now, and let's see what you've got on your end.
Let me know when you can see my screen, Ken.
Great. I see your screen. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. It's worth noting that in the example that Ken just showed, the product that he had on the screen was our Omega PS62. In this example, I'm utilizing an SW510W because it's one of the several switches that I have in a rack right beside me here. Automatic display control, automatic input switching, most of these features are available on any of our single switch enabled switches. So quite a few of the Omega boxes, our old CLSO products, if you guys remember those, and then things like this SW510W that I have here. So I'm logged into the SW510W interface here on the page that pops up as soon as you log in, the info page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and click on the display page, which is where pretty much all of our settings that we're going to be manipulating today are going to be at. Right now we're talking about automatic display control. So up in this top section here where it says control, you have a selection called display control method. Now on the right hand side, there's a nice little cheat sheet that goes through all the various display control methods that are available and essentially outlines briefly how each one of them work so that you don't have to do any sort of manual diving while you're trying to set this up. I'm going to drop this little menu down, and I'm just going to go to active video presence for this little quick demo. And you can see over on the right hand side that essentially what active video presence is, and it's probably exactly what you would assume it is, which is basically it's just monitoring active video presence on the input of the switch. When there is video signal presence on any of the inputs, including the BYOD input, it's going to...
Seth?
Yes.
Is it possible to zoom your browser in a little bit so that we can see the fonts a little better?
Maybe
like a Control Plus or Window Plus or something like that. Sometimes we'll...
Let's try. Yeah, there it is. How's that? Better?
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so again, active video presence, which is what I just set this for, essentially it's exactly what you might assume it would be, which is it's monitoring active video signal presence on the input, and that's all physical inputs as well as the BYOD input. Anytime it detects signal presence, it's going to send a power on command. That is, anytime it goes from no signal presence on any of the inputs to signal presence on one of the inputs, it will send a power on command. And then once it loses video signal presence on all inputs, it goes to an auto power off timer, which is a settable field here. I've got it set on 15 seconds, which is the lowest possible setting because I want to demonstrate this in a timely fashion, but you can set this all the way up to 8 hours, right? Can't really think of too many scenarios where you may want an 8-hour timer on the auto power off, but you can do that if you wanted to do it. Then you're going to set your control type, 3 different control types: IP, RS-232, or CEC. In the scenario where you're doing either IP or RS-232 control, it's going to be important for IP specifically to set your IP address and your port where you're controlling that display. But then down here, it's going to be also important that you actually specify what your commands are going to be, right? So you can now think of the switcher that you're using as both the switcher and the control device. It's going to be what actually sends your control signal via either RS-232 or IP. We do have quite a few different sort of broad drivers that are already added into the box. So if you're using a common display make and model, you know, I don't know, like maybe like a common Samsung commercial display or something, you can actually select that in this set of menus here, and it will auto-populate some generic power on, power off commands for those different displays. For the sake of today's example, I actually replaced the on command with the word hello and the off command with the word goodbye, just to easily demonstrate this. And as you can see, I'm sending this to an IP address of 10103, port 23. Just to quickly demo this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bounce over to my event viewer page in the administration tab. My event viewer is essentially, and this may mess up with me being so zoomed in. If it starts to be wonky, then I'll zoom back out. Essentially what this is doing is this is just showing me everything that's happening on the SW510W as it happens, so in real time. I'm going to reach to the back of my rack here, and I'm going to disconnect my velocity gateway, which is currently the active source on my SW510W. And when I do that, you notice that immediately a couple of things happen, but one of the things that happens is it starts this countdown timer, and you see it starts at 15 seconds because that's what I set it for. And when it reaches the bottom here, when it reaches 0, then it does a couple of things, one of which is send my display off command, which in this case I've set as goodbye. So you see it's sending this to IP address 10103 port 23, and the command is goodbye that I've specified there. So now my device has effectively powered off. Physically on the front panel, I can see that the display button has turned red, because that's what the LED looks like when it's in power off mode. And now I'm going to reach back here again and power this back on if I can get back here without breaking any cameras. Let's see, and plug this back in. And when I plug this back in again, quite a few things happen there. One of which is that it goes ahead and fires off my hello power on command, and everything powers back on. So that, in a nutshell, is automatic display control. Back to you, Ken.
Excellent. Thanks for that demo, Seth. I mean, that was, I think, about 5 minutes, of explanation and seeing the live demo. And you had automatic display control all set up. So nice work. Let me go back to my slide deck here. And let's take a look at the next slide. And this is the concept behind the second piece here, automatic input selection. So another touchless feature that's included in the Atlona products is called automatic input selection. You may sometimes see this referred to in documentation as AIS. This means you don't have to touch a remote control or a device button in order to switch sources. Now, let me show you how this one works here. So in this example here, presenter 1 is connected and is sharing a screen. Presenter 2 wants to present and does so by simply connecting a laptop to the next available HDMI cable. The image is now automatically displayed on the monitor. Now, presenter 3 comes in and now wants to share an image from her wireless device. She connects wirelessly to the Atlona switcher and her image is automatically cast to the display. Now, when presenter 3 disconnects her wireless device, her image disappears and the Atlona switch automatically presents the last connected source, which was presenter number 2. And when presenter number 2 disconnects from the HDMI cable, the Atlona switch automatically presents the last connected switch, which was presenter number 1. So it works in that order, going forward and backward. So let me switch back to you, Seth, and let's take a look at how to enable this using the menu in the 510W that you have there.
Of course. We'll just share my screen again here.
And that should give you the ability to share your screen again.
There you go. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see it and it's still zoomed in. Very nice.
Cool. So I'm going to go back to my display tab now. You probably noticed that I've got my auto switch checkbox up here, right above where my display control method is, in the exact same section of the embedded web page as control section. If my display control method is disabled, I have the ability to enable and disable my auto switch block here. Quite honestly, it is that simple, right? For enabling and disabling auto switching, it is just a checkbox. If it's checked, then you're going to constantly get your switcher auto switching. If it's unchecked, it's fully manual, meaning that you can either switch it from the input button on the front panel of the unit, or you can switch it with some sort of a third-party control system or velocity control system. In this case, it is already enabled. I am actually going to switch webcams here. So I've got another camera so that you can see my screen. Here you go.
We see it.
Turn that slightly. Okay, so you guys can see my screen there, and that is the splash screen for our velocity gateway. So right now I've got my velocity gateway that's in the rack, just acting as a source, HDMI out, plugged into one of the HDMI physical inputs on the SW510W. What I'm going to do to demonstrate this is I'm going to go ahead and screen share from my phone. So I'm already on the SW510W access point here. I'm going to go to screen mirroring on my phone and mirror my screen. Hopefully, there you go. and automatically you get my screen to change inputs there, right? So the SW510W has now swapped inputs to BYOD without me touching anything. I haven't pressed an input selection button on the front panel. I haven't set any control parameters at all. It just changed automatically. And when I decide that I'm done with it and hit stop mirroring, immediately that goes away and I get my gateway back. So it really is that simple. That I'll pass it back to you, Ken.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Seth. All right, let me re-enable myself here as the presenter. And share my screen one more time. Here we go. All right, so we just saw then automatic input selection. Last thing we want to take a look here at key features is the occupancy sensor. Now, another solution is to use an occupancy sensor. An occupancy sensor used in combination with the Atlona switch's trigger input-output port is a simple and effective way to automatically power the AV system on and off. Now, let me show you how this combination of features work. So in this example here, we have installed an occupancy sensor up in the corner of the room. When a person enters the room, they will activate the sensor. This in turn will send a signal to the switch. The switch will now power on the display. Now, the occupancy sensor can be used to power down the system just as easily. When the room is empty, it will sense no movement over a predetermined period of time and can communicate with the Atlona switch to send commands to power down the system. So using that occupancy sensor makes it real nice and easy. Seth, let's go ahead and flip back over to the 510W and take a look at where we can enable this occupancy sensor and make that work as well.
Sure. Now, it is worth noting here that I actually don't have an occupancy sensor here at my house, so I won't be showing an actual real live demo of this portion, but I am going to talk through how to set this up. Effectively, I'm assuming you can see my screen now, Ken?
Yes, you're live. Thank you.
Perfect. So effectively, the occupancy sensor or occupancy sensor mode is actually just part of the automatic display control that we discussed earlier. It's just a different mode as part of the automatic display control. Now, you'll notice that there are actually two modes with occupancy sensor. One is just occupancy sensor mode, which means that your occupancy sensor is connected to the trigger IO port on the back of the SW510W, and we are powering on and off the display only based on the occupancy sensor status. You know, if something were to happen to that occupancy sensor, if it were to just not function correctly, not pick up somebody's motion as they enter the room, then nothing would happen. The display would never turn on. You'd have to somehow find a way to trigger that occupancy sensor in order to get that display to turn on without touching anything. There's also a second mode called active video presence with occupancy sensor, as you can see here. And again, you know, as you might imagine, it is literally just both of those modes combined, right? So it is triggering display power on and display power off, both based on active video presence and occupancy sensor that would be located within the room in a scenario where maybe an occupancy sensor did not trigger a power on for some reason or another when someone walked into the room. Now, when they go and plug their signal in, or they send their signal, cast their signal to the system, immediately the display would turn on. So the way that I'm going to enable that, very simply, the same way as I did before, I'm going to drop this display control method down. I'm going to click on occupancy sensor in this case, and all of these sort of power on and power off parameters, such as auto power off timer, are now grayed out. And the reason that's grayed out is because normally an occupancy sensor is going to have this functionality built into it. It's effectively just you know, my mind's blanking here. It's essentially a relay that's triggering on and off, right? A contact closure. And that contact closure can be delayed, you know, for when it more, so that it's not the second someone moves outside of the sort of field of vision of this sensor that you get your display powering off or powering back on, so that it's not erratic like that. Normally there is some sort of a setting on the occupancy sensor itself. That's why this is grayed out. All we need to really set is what our control type is going to be, and then again, what our commands are going to be down here. And that's really it.
Okay, excellent, Seth. That's great. That's great. You pass control back. Let me grab control back here, and we'll go back to the slide deck here. We did some questions coming in. Thank you guys for submitting those. Once we get to the end here, we'll open up those questions and go through and answer all of them, so hold tight. Let me just switch this back over. And there we go. All right, so now that we've seen how the Atlona touchless features work, let's quickly take a moment and take a look at 3 modern business solutions that are available from Atlona that you can employ today. So first one we'll take a look at here is video conference rooms with the Omega MS42. So the Atlona MS42 is a 4x2 matrix switch and HD-based transmitter with HDMI, DisplayPort, and USB-C inputs. It also has mirrored HDMI and HD-based outputs, so it's perfect for video conferencing applications with the additional feature of built-in USB interfacing and extension to a display. So a very powerful product, and it's a perfect touchless solution with the automatic display control and automatic input selection features that Seth just went over with us. So second option here is to look at wired and wireless BYOD rooms with the Omega MS52W or the 510W that Seth just showed us. Incidentally, the difference between the 510W and the 52W is that the 52W adds USB routing into it. So if you need to control USB peripherals in your presentations and you want those to move with the presenter, the 52 is a great option for that. So the 52 is, as I mentioned, a wireless AV gateway. It delivers complete and simplified AV integration for collaborative meeting spaces with all of the conveniences and automation features that distinguish Atlona products among AV integrators. It is designed for video conference applications with built-in USB interfacing and extension to display, and it too is a perfect touchless solution with automatic display control and automatic input selection and the occupancy sensor trigger built into it. And one more, a third example we'll take a look at here, at classrooms and lecture halls using the Omega PS62. So the PS62 is a 6x2 matrix presentation switcher with HDMI, USB-C, and HD-based-T input. So if you're extending from a far distance away, this has HD-based-T inputs. Great solution here. Also has HDMI and HD-based-T outputs. It's part of the Omega series of products, so they all collaborate together. And it also is a perfect touchless solution with automatic display control and automatic input selection features. So you can find more out about these under our solutions tab on atlona.com. And before we move into the final stages in our Q&A, I want to remind everyone, today we are on part 2 of our touch-free AV webinar series. The next part will be in 2 weeks from today. We'll be bringing on Justin Kennedy, who's our product manager for control and management products. That includes Velocity. And we're going to be discussing the use of QR codes and bring your own device to further enable the touchless rooms. And maybe Seth, before we move on to this, maybe you give us a little more insight as to how Velocity and the use of QR codes ties into the programs you just showed us earlier.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, we are focusing on touchless AV today. And specifically in my portion here, we've talked about how we can essentially utilize the switcher itself as effectively the control gateway or the control processor and the switcher all in one. Justin is obviously going to go deeper into this, into how you can utilize velocity in this scenario as well. One thing that I wanted to highlight, though, specifically with what we've been doing today, is the way that velocity could potentially make these touchless systems better, in the ways that we've been using them today, is that you'll notice everything I configured only gave me the option to specify a singular command and to a singular location, right? Meaning, if I'm firing off an RS-232 command, it's going to one place. If I'm firing off an IP command, it's going to one IP address. I can't fire off multiple commands, and I definitely can't fire off multiple commands to multiple devices. If I wanted to utilize velocity with this, velocity will allow me to monitor all of these parameters within the 510W or any other switch that I might use, and trigger commands in various other devices as well, be them Atlona devices or third-party devices. Literally anything you wanted to control with these automatic type of switches, you could do that. So a great example would be, instead of just powering on my display, maybe I want to power on a display, normalize some audio within the room. So maybe set a microphone level for conferencing, set an output level on an amplifier, and maybe I want to recall a camera preset that I like to use or something along those lines. I could do all of that just monitoring active signal presence or monitoring an occupancy sensor within velocity. So velocity just sort of expands the scope of what we can do in a touchless environment. I definitely wouldn't think about touchless as exclusively non-velocity based. And again, Justin's going to really dive into that in 2 weeks.
Excellent. Thank you, Seth. So yeah, come back for that one with Justin, and we will do a live demo. Incidentally, if you cannot make it, sign up anyway. That way, when the webinar is over, we will send out the recording and you can play it back when you're available. All right. One other thing I want to mention is Atlona Academy. So to learn more about how to set up these touchless AV rooms and even to use velocity, sign up for Atlona Academy if you haven't already done so. It's completely free. There's tons of content on there. All of our content is industry accredited, so you get credits for taking all of it. But it's a great way to get caught up on how to set up some of these solutions, these touch-free solutions. Also, one last thing to mention to you is the YouTube channel. Check out the Atlona YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed to this, subscribe to it so you get updates on the new videos. We put all of our content out here, including our velocity and our networking training videos, so that it's very easy to get to and set up Atlona products. So I always tell people, learn no matter where you go. Take our training experts with you. Subscribe to the channel so that you never miss out. All right, with that, Seth, let's go ahead and transition into some Q&A. We had a lot of questions coming in. Our contact information is up here, so hang on to that. If you need to reach us after the webinar, feel free to reach out. Let me jump into a couple of these and see what we have to say. So question here, Seth, we have, I see, okay, so this actually is a great question, slightly a topic different than what we discussed here today, but someone is asking, they sell a lot into K-12 and want to know, does the screen mirroring have a moderator mode? And if so, how does that work?
Sure. So I don't know if you want to give me control back and let me show this, or if you just want to. Okay. Let's do that. Yeah, because I mean, I could show this live. So the answer to that question is yes, we do have moderator mode. You may have noticed in the menus. Here, let me just bounce back.
Yep, we're seeing your screen.
My screen. Okay.
Yep.
So you may have noticed over here in my menus under administration, there is a tab called moderator. If I bounce over to moderator and enable this, just simply check that enable box. Now, whenever I go to share my content, get back here.
So right now you switch to your wireless phone and you're going to go ahead and try to cast to the 510.
Correct.
Okay.
So whenever I try to cast my phone here, right there. So it pops in. So my screen, and I know you guys can't see my screen because I haven't switched cameras, but my screen currently does not show what is being cast. Over here on my display, though, I do see that you know, the name of the phone, and in this case, I don't really name my phone, so it's just called iPhone, is coming in. I've got an actual active preview, and you can see this flashing about every, I don't know, 5 seconds or so. This is basically just doing a screen scrape every 5 seconds or so, so it's not fully live, so that you know exactly what content this person is trying to display, and you have the ability to allow that, which will go ahead and allow it through and pop my content up on the screen, which I just did, and now my content is up on the screen. Or I can kick that content at any point in time. If multiple users try to share their content, you will also get all of those users in a list here, and you can choose which ones you want to allow or kick. And that's how moderator mode works.
And Seth, if you don't mind, real quick, since if someone doesn't have this web GUI interface to log into, how else might they manage moderator mode?
Yeah, so you can enable moderator mode within Velocity as well. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Ken?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so you can also enable moderator mode within Velocity, and then essentially just manage that on your Velocity touch panel. You know, this kind of obviously moderator mode, as Ken mentioned, does kind of move away from this idea of touchless interfaces. Although, you know, tying back into what you're going to be doing with Justin, he is going to be showing you guys how to do QR codes on the screen of a Velocity gateway or Velocity touch panel, so that you can log into a control interface on your phone. I guess theoretically, to keep it fully touchless, if you integrated this to Velocity with moderator mode on and had a QR code, you could do everything right from your phone and still not be touching any devices that any other person is touching. So it is possible in kind of a roundabout way, but yeah, that's moderator mode.
Okay, excellent. That's exactly what I was getting at. Thank you, Seth. All right, so some other questions here. With the AIS mode, can I set priorities on specific inputs? If yes, where is that configured?
Sure. So actually, on automatic input switching mode, specifically on the 510W, it is actually it is just bouncing back to the most recent input that was on there before the active input. I think some of our, and Ken, you may remember this better than me, I think some of our older switchers actually did have a way to set priority, but I don't remember specifically which switchers those were. I think maybe some of the CLSOs possibly had a mode where you could specify a priority input. On the 510W specifically, that is not available.
Yeah, I mean, you can always from your control panel, which could be your own touchless device, your own handheld device, you could, you know, trigger the direct input you want to jump to.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, excellent. Good question. Another question here. Do you sell the occupancy sensor? Does Atlona sell the occupancy sensor?
So currently today, we do not sell an occupancy sensor. As a matter of fact, we don't really sell any sensors. But you know, there are plenty of manufacturers of sensors out there, and yeah, lots of those things out there. Most of them should work. It's pretty standard operation on any occupancy sensor that you could pick up.
Yeah, and that question did come up 2 weeks ago on our first series webinar too, when we had David Shamir, our Director of Product Management on, and he did mention that Atlona was looking at an occupancy sensor down the road, so that might be something to watch for, but there are so many great ones out there that do work as well. Another question here, also regarding occupancy sensors. Can you set the occupancy sensor to just turn off on no movement and disable the turn on with movement? Because sometimes we just have a meeting not requiring AV, and I wouldn't want the system to turn on with every person entering the room.
Sure, understandable. I would say that that's going to be very much specific to the manufacturer of the aux sensor. you know, seeing as it would be a setting inside of the occupancy sensor. If you could do that, then I suppose you would set it up for active video presence with occupancy sensor mode. And that would be a great example of an area where you may want to use that mode, so that now the system only turns on whenever you plug in an actual source that you want to share, not when someone walks in the room. But when someone leaves the room, you do still want to send that, you know, that contact closure, so that you get the power down functionality from the aux sensor. But again, it totally dependent on the aux sensor manufacturer. Since we don't manufacture those, I can't say specifically that exists, but it's possible that it does. Hopefully that helps.
Excellent. And then one final question, occupancy sensor. Where does the occupancy sensor plug into the switcher?
Yeah, great question. So on the back, and actually, let's just pull up a picture. On the back of the device, there is a trigger IO port. If my browser will stop just crawling here, I can show you guys this. Let's see. Sorry guys, this really is just kind of crawling. All right, UHD SW510W. And I will blow this picture up once it loads. And you'll see this trigger IO port right here on the back of the unit. So that is where you would plug in your occupancy sensor. It would go directly into that port right there. There is a wiring diagram and instructions on how to use this in our manual as well.
And keep that up for just a moment, Seth, that picture, because we have another question here.
Sure.
Someone has asked, why are the USB ports on the 510 labeled for specific items such as Miracast and Wi-Fi?
Great question. This box comes with small little antennas for wireless. It is worth noting that there are many different configurations in which you can use this box from a networking perspective. Highly recommend that everyone checks out our IT deployment guide for this device, which is located under the resources tab. And that walks through all of the various ways you can connect this. One of the ways you can use this, and the way that I'm using this right now at my house, is utilizing these small little wireless dongles connected to the back of the unit. One goes in the side that says Wi-Fi, one that goes in the side that says Miracast. The reason there are two separate ones is because the way that Miracast works, and I'm not going to describe this as eloquently as someone like maybe David Shamir could describe it, but the way that Miracast works from a wireless perspective is slightly different than the way that we're doing casting via Google Cast and Apple AirPlay. So the Wi-Fi antenna is essentially what's broadcasting our SSID that we're discovering for Google Cast, for AirPlay, and just in general to connect to this device. And then the Miracast port over there is its own antenna that we're using for MDNS discovery of this device from your Windows device, from your Windows machine, right? So effectively, it's just two different technologies, and they need two different antennas. So it's two small little USB antennas that connect to either side.
Excellent. Thank you, Seth.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Someone says, does the Omega MS42 and the Omega MS52 have a built-in splash page or graphic that can be customized to provide instructions to the end users on how to connect to the system, much like the splash page that you have on the 510?
It does. So are we still sharing my screen?
We are, and I think the answer is the 42 does not, but the 52 does.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, good point. So great point, Ken. So the MS42 does not do wireless BYOD. The SW510W and the MS52W, since they both do BYOD, do have splash screens, which is what I'm showing right here, where you can set these up with custom images and then up top custom instructions.
Excellent. Yep, excellent. Now, somebody else is asking the question here. I see USB 3 ports. Does it switch USB 3? My guess is maybe they're seeing USB-C ports and are maybe assuming those are 3.0.
Yeah. So this device does not support USB 3.0. As you said, Ken, there is a USB-C port on here. It is worth noting that on the SW510W, since we are not transmitting USB data over the HD-base-T output, this USB-C port on the 510W is specifically only used for audio and video, whereas on the MS52W, the USB-C port is carrying data across that HD-base-T output, so it is carrying data on the USB-C port as well. Slightly confusing, but just remember that the 510W is not transmitting USB data, whereas the 52W and most of the Omega products are transmitting USB data over HD-base-T. The limitation there and the reason why we're not supporting USB 3.0 is because the Valens chipset today does not currently have enough bandwidth to support USB 3.0. So that's the HD-base-T output chipsets that we're using do not support the bandwidth needed for USB 3.0 support. So we do not support USB 3.0. This is a USB 2.0 box, and not the 510W, the Omega, the MS42 and MS52.
Yep. Excellent, thank you. Another question here regarding wireless. With the wireless connectivity, do you get audio as well as video?
Yes, it will share audio as well, so you will get both.
How many participants can connect at a time wirelessly, and how many can be displayed?
So how many can connect wirelessly? I think I've asked that question before, and to be honest, off the top of my head, I don't remember. I've certainly had, like quite a few, like call it, 5+ participants joined in when I have moderator mode running just as a demonstration. And that works just fine. It's not blocking anybody with that many users. I don't remember off the top of my head what the number is. But what's important is how many can be displayed, and the answer to that is just one at a time. This is not any sort of graphics processor, so it's not taking multiple images and pushing them together in a picture-in-picture format or a quad view format or anything like that. We cannot do that with these devices. So it's just one participant being shared on the screen at a time.
Yeah, excellent. Now you can have, I forget what the number is too, but in that moderator view you showed, say you've got 8 people that have all connected, that list of 8 people will show there, and you can, push one at a time to the screen. Okay, another good question regarding occupancy sensor. We touched on something similar, but someone here has mentioned that they have multiple types of staff entering a room at different times: janitorial, security, facility staff. I want to know if you can define a time as to when the occupancy sensors can trigger on and off.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's possible. So within the 510W and with everything that I've shown today, without a velocity control system, there's no way to actually do that. I'm sort of dreaming up a way in my head of how we might be able to do something like that within velocity, something where maybe you define a schedule within velocity and set a variable within that schedule. So for example, you basically say, within the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., maybe this is when the cleaning staff is in, and you don't want them to be triggering on and off displays. And so you say basically set variable to, cleaning equals 1 or something. And then you put some sort of condition on that variable to say basically if the occupancy sensor triggers on and cleaning equals 0, meaning that cleaning staff shouldn't be in the room at that time, go ahead and power on the display. But again, all of that would have to be done within velocity. And also, this is just me sort of thinking about this in real time in my head. So don't quote me on that working exactly as I've specified it, but I think we could probably do something along those lines within velocity, yes.
Yeah, I believe you're right there. Next question, when we log into the web page, I believe they mean the 510 GUI interface, web GUI, is there any default ID or password to access?
I'm going to answer this in 2 ways because I'm not sure exactly what the question is asking. If the question is asking what the default username and password is for the actual user interface here, the answer is all lowercase admin for user and then capital A Atlona for password. And you do have the ability to change that. As you can see here, it's giving me all sorts of warnings telling me that my default password is being used and asking me to change the password. And then the other question that I'm going to answer, which may actually be what this person is talking about, is to actually connect to the unit. So where's my splash screen? There we go. So on my splash screen, I've actually got this thing set up to display the password. Actually, it's not in the splash screen where I set that. It is. Can't remember, it's not under display. Can't remember exactly. Oh, you know what? Under networking, probably. Yeah, so show access point credentials. So essentially at the bottom of my screen, I'm displaying my password, which currently is 1234567 I believe that the default password out of the box is 1234567 or the default password out of the box may be no password. Off the top of my head, I don't 100% remember, but from this user interface, you can set that SSID password to be anything that you want it to be. You can also set that to a rotating password, as you can see here. And when you set this to a rotating password and ask you how often you want to rotate that password, the way we would use this functionality is in a conference room, for example. If you rotate the password every 24 hours, it ensures that a guest that came in and used the conference room the day before that walks into the building the second day can't just accidentally share their content to that SW510W or other wireless device in a conference room that they're not currently connected to, just because their phone remembers the SSID password and automatically jumps on.
Excellent. Thank you, Seth. Now, I know we've gone a little bit over. We only have a couple of questions left, so we'll just try to address these so we make sure we get everybody answered here. Next question we have, to control a display via IP, will I need a switch or are you connecting directly from the LAN to the monitor LAN?
So most likely you would need a switch, right?
For IP, yeah.
Yeah, so there is, I'm trying to think if that would potentially work. To be honest, the way you would have to do that is essentially you would have to take probably some sort of a crossover cable and connect it from your laptop directly into the LAN port on the 510W to configure it, because you have to get into the this user interface via LAN to be able to configure this in the first place. Then you would disconnect and connect that directly to a display via IP. I'm just going to go ahead and say that's not something that we would recommend. We would recommend that you utilize a switch. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, probably a 1 gig managed switch, but nothing too crazy after that. The box is going to come with DHCP enabled out of the gate. You can disable DHCP via the front panel and change that to a static IP, but you know, it would also be useful in just ease of setup to have a DHCP server on that managed switch that you're using as well.
All right. One more question. How does audio connect into the system?
How does audio connect into the system? So on the SW510W specifically, There is an auxiliary audio port here in the form of a 3.5 millimeter connection. And then you have an analog audio output in the form of captive screw up here, which is just going to be de-embedded audio. Whatever comes in comes out. And you also get your program audio, basically. Whatever comes in on these on these digital connectors gets de-embedded here, but also gets fired over to the far end over HDBaseT or out of this HDMI output here. Hopefully that answers the question. I think it's relatively simple.
Very good. Okay, I think we've gotten through the majority of the questions. If we missed a question for you, don't worry, we will go back in and check all the questions after this is over and respond to those. As I mentioned, you will receive an email afterwards, a follow-up email. It will include a link to the recording, so you have access to play this back or share it with any of your partners or coworkers. Also, don't forget Atlona.com. Click on the resources tab and then webinars, register for the next webinar happening in 2 weeks. Also on that page is the button for the webinar archive, where you'll be able to access the recording of this webinar and any webinar we've done in the past, okay? All right, Seth, thank you for your time today. Everyone, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us on setting up a touch-free AV room. If you have any more questions, feel free to email us or check us out on Atlona.com. Everyone have a great day. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.